Hello, I'm here today to talk to you about the way in which you go about structuring your oral. I am going to share the criteria in a minute, and at the end of this little installment, you will be able to use the attached generic guide. Now, there are multiple ways of structuring your oral. The fundamentally important aspect of your choice is one, that it needs to be logical and coherent, and two, that it needs to be balanced. So I'm going to just share my screen for a second, and I want to just show you the criteria for criteria C because it's so important. So if you look here, we're looking at a summary of the criteria from InThinking, which is a great website, by the way, that I'm sure many of your teachers use. Criteria C, focus and organization. We want to remember that all of these criteria, as we know, are worth equal amounts, 10. And really, it's quite easy to do very well in criteria C as long as you pay attention to what's being asked of you. So I want to draw your attention to this word balanced. We have here, the oral maintains a focus on the task despite some lapses. Treatment of the extracts and works texts are mostly balanced. Development of ideas is mostly logical, generally connected in a coherent manner. What does that mean? That means it needs to make sense. The way that you're speaking, what you're speaking about needs to make sense. But what do we mean by balance? Let's have another look at how often this comes up, and then we'll really have a think. So 7 and 8, treatment of the extracts works is balanced. 5 to 6 was mostly balanced. And then 9 to 10, treatment of the extracts works is well balanced. So in short, you can't get higher than a 4 if your oral is not balanced. So I'm going to stop sharing now, and I'm going to talk to you about what that means. What does that mean? It means that in the time that you've been allotted, which is 10 minutes, your treatment of text A and text B, your lit and your non-lit text, is equal in terms of time. So, we're looking at about 4 minutes, hopefully, for your first lit text and 4 minutes for your non-lit text. Okay, so you don't spend 7 minutes talking about text 1 and only 3 about the second text. That would be imbalanced. So you're not going to get above a 4. Okay, and you really won't. So you've really got to pay attention to this. But, and this is the difficulty, I think, in addition to treating both of those two texts equally in terms of your time management and your discussion, you also need to balance your conversation with a conversation about the wider body of work. So what does that mean? That means that fundamentally, you give your general introduction. We're going to come to a structure in a second. And when you move on to discuss your first text, you've got approximately, say, 4 minutes. You want to use, 2.5 maximum, no more than 3. You don't really want to be going up to 3, looking at your extract, and then the other 1.5, 2, if you really want it to be spot on balanced, exploring the wider body of work. Then you move to your next text, looking at your extract, looking at your chosen moment, and then moving out to the wider body of work. So it's almost like, you can think about it like this. I think I've said this already, that the oral is divided into 2, i.e. text 1, text 2, but then also divided again into 2. So you've kind of got 4 parts: the text and then the wider body of work. So how do you structure it? Well, as I say, as long as it's coherent and logical, there is not really a fixed way. That said, increasingly, the orals that seem to flow the best, and let's really remember that this is an oral examination. So when your teacher, when your examiner, when someone like I listens to it, it needs to make sense to me. And sometimes what makes sense on paper doesn't always make sense when we're speaking. So think about that. And the transitions need to be flagged very clearly. So what seems to me to work, and what seems to me to be the easiest way of going about this, but again, as long as you structure it in a coherent fashion, you do not have to follow this, is 1 minute for an introduction. in which you establish your global issue, you name your texts, you state the relevance of that global issue, why you're discussing it, the national, transnational, local significance of that global issue, and then bang, straight into your first text, which ideally should be your literary text. Very, 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 very brief overview of the work, and then straight into your extract. Explore the extract, digging deep and zooming in. And then after 2.5 minutes, 2 minutes, you move out and you look at the wider body of work again for approximately 2 minutes. If it is imbalanced there, and it can be, it doesn't have to be absolutely 2 minutes, 2 minutes, 2 minutes, 2 minutes. I would encourage you, forcefully encourage you to focus on giving a bit more time to your extract. Remember that your extract really is the moment where you're going to be hitting your B. So, if you spend 2.5 minutes exploring your extract, then, you're going to spend about 1.5 minutes talking about the wider body of work. So if we work with that kind of idea, perhaps we're going to do 1 minute introduction, 2.5 minutes on your literary extract, 1.5 minutes linking out to the wider body of work, or maybe 2 and 2, switching to your non-lit, again, 2 to 2.5 minutes on that non-lit extract, and then 2 minutes to 1.5 minutes on the wider body of work, and then some kind of conclusion. And when you move to that conclusion, I sincerely encourage you to not just restate what you've done, but to employ and engage with one of the prompts that exists for this exam, which is, in what ways do the form and the content of your given texts engage with your global issue? And so I think that a very smart and useful thing to do in your conclusion is to, briefly restate what you've said, but then offer some kind of personal evaluation. And here it might be that you want to say that, whilst both texts engage with and expose my global issue, bombity bomb. And by the way, when you're talking about your global issue, state the global issue. Don't keep saying my global issue. Examiners are human beings. We may have forgotten your global issue, 8 minutes in. So keep stating it. It's important to hear it, not my global issue. Otherwise, the coherence and the logical development may be lost. So, even if you think, oh gosh, I've said that so many times, doesn't matter. Say it again. So back to the conclusion. When you get to your conclusion, in my opinion, for me, the poetic form of text 1 provides a much more impactful engagement with my global issue of, the isolating effects of depression, because poetry is by nature a deeply personal and reflective form of communication, or because poetry allows, through its incredibly metaphorical and visual elements of language, to create a very strong and impactful image in the reader's head. Something like that. Some way in which you almost, if you like, it's a little bit like fishing. You've kind of baited your hook and you've let that hook out for your teacher. And so hopefully then, and we're going to move to follow-up questions a little bit further on, when you get to your follow-up questions, which are going to come, boom, straight after your conclusion, right? Your teacher is able to say, well, that was a really interesting point. So could you just, elaborate for me, explain further, why is it that you feel that poetry as a form is more successful in engaging with this issue? So 1, you're hitting your criteria, you're showing that you can evaluate, and you're referring to the form, because it's always important to think about why is it that this poetic extract somehow is more powerful, for me at least, than the magazine cover, or flip side, you know, that in my opinion, this magazine cover, appearing as it does globally, is much more impactful because it will communicate with a much wider audience. But something that shows that you've thought about the two different forms, the two different genres, and you've thought about why one may be more or less successful in engaging with your global issue. Now, attached to this, you should be able to download a very generic plan. And as I say, you can follow this plan if you want, or you can reorganize. I think that, you know, some students, for example, do introduction, wider body of work, extract, wider body of work, extract. I mean, I think that's fine. As I say, my only potential preoccupation there is that perhaps if you go about it in that order, you may not give yourself time to fully unpick your extract. But as long as you flag your transitions clearly, so, you know, moving on to my wider body of work, going to the extract, looking at line 1 of the extract, really make clear as you transition where we are, what we're focusing on, then you will be coherent, and therefore you will be hitting the criteria. But balance, 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 balance. Make sure you cope with and focus on text A, text B, and then when you're doing text A, not just your extract, but your wider body of work, okay? I know that I have said that multiple times, but I can't overstress it because it really is something that's been happening a lot, something that I keep seeing happening, and it's a bit of a tragedy, really. You're listening to a fantastic oral and somebody really hasn't moved on to explore the wider body of work, or if they have, it's literally kind of 10-second comment, and unfortunately that's going to pull you down. So make sure you have a balance. And if you spotted my strange little Norwegian troll, well done you. Okay, so I shall be returning in a moment to discuss the wider body of work, and I hope that was helpful.